So Mick called me later on in the evening and he said, look, to put it bluntly, you are a sponge. That is the technical term for it. When I type in your name in our systems, every trainer has said that you've been a fantastic student and you were asking questions way above their knowledge. And that just shows that you've got some skill, you've got some talent. And how do you fancy actually working in IT? Keep listening to the Tech Talks and Soul Walks podcast. Hello and welcome back to Tech Talks and Soul Walks podcast. And I'm your host, Julie Kubiak. My background is in IT and I have been interested in IT since the mere age of 9, back in the early 80s. In fact, let's just roll back to how I started off in IT so I can give you a bit of background into where this is all going. So in the early to mid 80s, I went on a course at the then computer shop called Tandy. You may know it now as Curry's or Curry's PC World. And my dad's friend, Nigel, he was the manager at the shop in Coventry, just opposite Paul Meadow. So those from Coventry, you can picture where it was. And the course was BBCB Basics, and that's what we were programming on. BBCB computers, basic coding, and I'd been coding for a good few months at this point, buying the magazines, reading the codes, typing it out, recording the programs onto tapes, playing it, rewinding it, fast forwarding it, everything that we used to do back in those days. And I just got such a craving to learn more. And my dad put me in touch with Nigel and Nigel put me on the course. If I remember, the course was it must have been either a week. For some reason, 3 weeks rings a bell, but I can't work out the timings in my head. And we were given little tasks to do each day. We were taught lots of little bits and pieces. But we are talking about the early 80s here, when not many people had computers and it was a fairly new thing. And nobody at school really had an interest in this, and certainly not when I was in junior school anyway. Anyway, passed the course, and I didn't have much more dealings with computers apart from the one that we had at home at this point, until I was in my later years. I think I was about what you would call, we used to call it third year seniors, and I think it's year 8 now, or 9. And my tutor at school was the head of IT. Now, it'll make you laugh that I call him the head of IT because he was probably the only person that dealt with IT in the school. And I believe we had about 6 or 7 computers in our classroom. This was our daily meetup where we'd just go for registration. And once a week, we'd have like a 40-minute session where the tutor, he'd pick up on any problems, concerns, and deal with them. But luckily for us, though, being in a room of computers, all he wanted us to do was to sit down, shut up, so he could get on with his own paperwork for 45 minutes. And he used to load up the game for us called Arcadia. Well, it's exactly the same game that we had at home. And I would challenge everybody else in the class, and nobody would ever beat my high score. And I would literally continue on to the maximum score and finish the game every single week without fail. And it wasn't because I was particularly good at the game. It was easy to do. And anybody else playing the game just didn't have this access to the computer. So therefore, my skills and my talent outshone theirs because I had access to a computer and therefore I had like unlimited desire, let's say, to get on, to do things in IT and to obviously challenge myself to get better and better and better. My first job when finishing my A-levels was in Coventry Building Society, little branch, and I was a cashier. And it was the same as most people of my era, my age, early 90s at this point. And if you couldn't get a job, you'd go and work at Coventry Building Society. The number of my friends that ended up at Coventry Building Society's head office was unbelievable. And here, I was using computers, but it was very mundane. Didn't get a chance to do anything other than put in the information. I was sent on the word processing course, which was a doddle, and that gave me time away from the cashier's desk to do some typing up of letters in the back. And it was just different. But it still wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wasn't really doing what I wanted with computers. But it felt that it was a step in the right direction with regards to work. After 2.5 years of being a branch cashier, and I was tearing my hair out because I wanted more. I wanted more in life. I wanted more from a job than just literally putting building society books in, sorting cash out, bringing cash in, cashing up at the end of the night, filling up the ATM machines. And I was craving more. And I approached my then branch manager and the regional manager because I demanded I wanted to take this further. And I explained what it was I wanted. Funnily enough, 3 jobs came up at head office at this time, and they offered it to myself and somebody else in another branch locally. And it was in the IT department, working for one of 3 managers. Anyway, cut a long story short, when I went to the job interview, my eyes were wide open. I was amazed at the number of people in there working in the IT department and how huge the department was. But no one person's job was the same as anybody else's. And I went in and saw the server rooms, and I saw the PAs to all the different managers, and I saw the developers and all the admin staff as well, as in like the systems administration people. And the interview I gave, because I was so excited about going to work up there, I didn't end up just working for one manager. They actually doubled up one of the jobs to work for 2 of the managers, and I took on the job of 2 people in one position. So, okay, they were probably breaking the rules a little bit, but obviously saving a lot of money because only 2 people were suitable for the role, and they had 3 positions. Anyway, these 2 managers, although their roles were very, very different, they managed a team of people within a huge office. And I was the PA that used to sit in front of them both, and everyone had to get past me to get to the 2 managers. And we had this new program out that they were trialing within the IT department before releasing it out to the branches. Their plan was to bring something in called Lotus Smart Suite. Now, Lotus Smart Suite, you may have heard of Lotus 123. It is a spreadsheet program, and there was Lotus Ami Pro, and there was Lotus Freelance Graphics. I have to remember what it was called then. And I had my manager, Marie Newham, kind of teach me a few bits and pieces. Now, some of the basics I'd learned and I knew from obviously all my coding and background in IT that I'd had for a good 10+ years at this point. And I then had word processing experience as well from when I was working within the branch, but it was all DOS based. And none of it was what was then called, and what was amazing at the time, WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And this was just amazing, and it blew me away. And I was like, wow. And Marie and I used to kind of feed off each other in a competitive kind of way. We'd both find out little things and we'd share them with each other and say, oh my God, have you seen this? Did you know you could do this? And the pair of us were just constantly chucking ideas and information to each other. And I absolutely loved it. So they sent me on some IT courses, and the training company that they sent me to, unknown until the day I got there, one of my friends, good friend that I used to hang around with outside of school, Mick, was the head of HR there. He read my trainer reviews, where you had to review the trainer after each course, and he contacted me at my desk on the phone when I was working one day and said, hi, I've looked at your feedback. I've seen the feedback from the trainers as well. How do you fancy becoming an IT trainer? Well, technically a trainee trainer to begin with. And I said, should we really be having this conversation while I'm at work? How's about calling me tonight at home? So Mick called me later on in the evening, and he said, look, to put it bluntly, you are a sponge. That is the technical term for it. When I type in your name in our systems, every trainer has said that you've been a fantastic student and you were asking questions way above their knowledge. That just shows that you've got some skill, you've got some talent, and how do you fancy actually working in IT? And anyway, I went for the job interview, sailed through the interview, and they actually said at the end of it, this was just a technicality, it's a formality. We were going to offer you the job anyway, no matter how you did in the interview. But I blew them away anyway. And yeah, I had to hand my notice in, and Murray was gutted. He didn't speak to me for those 4 weeks that I had to work my notice, and I couldn't understand it, didn't know what I'd done. But everyone said, because he could see the potential in me, he was gutted that the Building Society couldn't offer me more, couldn't do any more. And they had kind of tempted me with a carrot and said, look, you could, become like a training advisor, help out with the training department, something like that. When it came to rolling out Lotus Smart Suite, but it never came, it never happened. And even though that was in the plan, it was probably going to be years away, because things like this don't happen overnight within IT. It is a long process. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, money to be found, schedules to be sorted, things like that. Anyway, I started off as a trainee trainer, loved it. Trained some huge companies. I went to the BBC in Cardiff and did numerous courses down there for them. And that was actually on Lotus 123. And then I also went to Donald and Atkinson, if that's how you pronounce it, and who could pronounce it properly. And there I was training them on Lotus Ami Pro, which is the same as Microsoft Word. Price Waterhouse was another one that I went down and trained. And I was actually training who they call the Roaming Warriors, I think was the term at the time, which I thought was an amazing title for them. They were accountants that would be out and about in the field doing their job, obviously, whatever it is they do as accountants. And then they would come back, and in the evening, I would actually have to train them. I would also update their computers with the latest version of the software and things like that, and then send them away afterwards. But I'd be there for Q&A on computers as well. And it was just amazing. I just had such a fun time. And when I was training, it didn't feel like a job. It was just something I loved to do. And if I didn't know the answer, I'd go away and find it. If I didn't know sort of how to do something, I would work on it and work out how to do it. But my talent and my skill and my ability was always higher than everybody else's that I was training. And that does give you some kind of boost of confidence to know that you know more than the other people. But I was honest enough, if somebody asked me a question, I was like, don't know, or maybe it's not possible, or let's try and work it out together. And people just assumed that I would know everything, but everybody that was dealing with me knew that I was honest and I was genuine. Now, over the years, I've seen some IT trainers that are full of BS, and they would literally say something for the sake of saying it, and pretty much embarrassing other trainers and other people, because if they didn't know the answer, they'd make it up, and that's wrong. And to me, that really used to grate me. And even the trainers that would stand there and read a training course from a manual, that was another bugbear. And there was one person in particular that I worked with that did exactly that. It was as if she didn't know the course she was working with. It's as if she didn't know the software that she was training. And people used to come back to me within the job I was doing and say, but she doesn't know what she's training. And I said, but she's getting paid more than me. And they were shocked. And I said, yeah. I said, because she's got more experience in IT, number of years, than I've got. And my friends would just be shaking their heads, jaws on the floor, saying, but how come, though, when you're a better trainer, you know more, you're better at that interaction with the students? And I said, I can't do anything about it. And it was that actually pushed me to leave my full-time job and go into IT contracting. Now, when I moved into IT contracting, that was in 1998. That was a huge leap for me to go from having numerous different jobs, some of them temping jobs in between IT jobs, but to actually say, okay, I'm going to set up my own limited company and do this. Now, to put you in the picture, in the late 90s, everybody was doing this. IT was the place to work. You could overpay your mortgage. You could go on holiday as often as you liked. You put everything through the business that was related to IT and your training and travel and anything like that, because that is what everybody did, because it was such a huge thing in the late 90s. And at this point in time, I'd set up Julie Kubiak Limited as a business, and I was working for Rover Group. Now, Rover Group then became BMW, and it was Land Rover as well. And I was working at the Longbridge site, which is no longer there. Probably a housing estate now, actually. And I was going down to their Oxford offices, Beacon Hill, which is in Birmingham, and the Lode Lane, which was the Land Rover site. Anyway, working all around these sites and places, I was training and doing support for everybody from the people on the production line, their supervisors or managers who had office-based jobs or had to update information on the systems, all the way through to some of the top directors within BMW and Land Rover and Rover Group. And I wasn't fazed no matter who I was talking to, because my passion for IT really shone through. And that is what stood out to them all. Everything kind of came to an abrupt stop as we were approaching the millennium. So 1999, unfortunately, had a car accident. I was off work for a good few weeks, really struggled to recover, which was very strange. My body was just not getting back into things properly, and had a long session of about 6 weeks off work. Unfortunately, I'd really damaged my collarbone. I couldn't drive. I was in real severe pain. And my then line manager at the Rover Group contacted me, and we'd been in touch regularly on a weekly basis. And he said, right, unfortunately, we can't hold this position open anymore. All the training had actually come to an end before I'd left, and it was me solely doing this training anyway. And he said, as much as we'd like to offer you more work, all projects are coming to a stop. And we'd heard about this. We knew there wasn't much money left within the pot, let's say, of IT. But what was happening was they were closing down all the projects, getting rid of all the staff because of the takeover by BMW. That had an impact in it. But it was because of the millennium that was approaching. Anyone that has been around through those years will know exactly what I'm talking about, where the companies didn't want to spend a penny in case they were going to have to use it after midnight into the year 2000 to rectify any problems. So testing was going on. What was going to happen, nobody knew. And it was just a case of, okay, let's just bank the money. Let's just sit and wait in case we need it. So a lot of people I know ended the year of 1999, December 1999, not unemployed, but out of work, let's say. Just a different way of saying it, I know. So anyway, Australia obviously clicked over first to the year 2000 before the rest of the world did. And there was seemingly no bugs. There was nothing that happened. As we all went into the new year, the new decade, the new century, nothing happened to the computers. And although businesses and companies were prepared for the worst, which you have to prepare for the worst, nothing happened. But equally, they were still ultra cautious, and they still didn't want to invest any more money into projects. Now, within the IT world, a project can't just be switched on or started immediately or overnight. It's years in the planning. And because for years they'd been building up to this point, it was going to take years then to start any new projects or get any new goals or systems out or in place. So for a good few years, IT kind of became a secondary career for a lot of people. A lot of people went back into temping or other jobs, and including myself, but I went back in to do development work. Now, when I was at Rover Group and some of the time where it was quiet, I was going off and doing some courses, and I became a systems developer and systems administrator within what was then called Lotus Domino. I stuck with the Lotus products because it was what I knew, and at Rover Group they were using Lotus Notes. And I trained and got the awards and the qualifications even to do Lotus Systems Administration and Lotus Notes Developer. So with those two, most people go down one route, but for some reason I was torn between the two, and I thought, no, I need to learn both and I need to know both. Didn't really quite understand why at the time. So I went off and I basically created a job, told this company, who my dad was working for at the time, I said, I could actually make your manual process of doing everything on spreadsheets, I could make that into a computer system for you, create the software, set up the computers. And I mean, literally starting from scratch, from installing the server, the network, to putting the software on, doing the backups and everything. And looking back now, that was a huge achievement for me because I'd never done anything like that before, but I just knew what to do. And even though we hadn't got the internet as we had now, I was still going off and learning it. I was finding out information. I was asking people, friends in the business, how would I do this? How can I do that? And I just did it. And I can't explain to this day how I actually achieved it, but I did it. And to think back about it, it actually blows me away that I was able to do that. And it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the office, I think. And I got them all networked and set up, running the backups and everything like that with the software I wrote. And it did everything from logging the make, model, derivative of the vehicle, to purchasing the vehicles on bulk and then selling on the vehicles, outright sales, invoicing, everything. Everything was done through that system I actually wrote and I implemented within that company. Now, my then husband didn't see that I was doing an IT job. To him, I was just sitting playing around on a computer. And that really grated me because his job was very manual, very labour orientated, but mine was computer based. And even though I was earning, when I was an IT contractor, I was earning 3 times his annual salary, it still wasn't work. And then when I had become ill and with the millennium bug and working for this company, I was earning, but clearly it wasn't the same as him. So he was really putting me down, really belittling my job working in IT. And that obviously eventually came to a head and we got divorced. And that then shook off some of my old patterns of thinking and working and allowed me to move forwards within what I wanted to do within IT. Now, before that happened, I fell pregnant and it was planned to have a family because obviously my work had practically dried up. And I became ill, unfortunately, very ill during my pregnancy, my first daughter. And it just felt like I'd had a virus. It then kind of dragged on. It was like post-viral fatigue, but there was more to it. And slowly, over the course of a few weeks, my health really deteriorated to an unfortunate point where it was like I'd had a stroke. Down my right-hand side, I lost all sensation. I couldn't feel anything down my right-hand side. I lost sort of motor control on it. I couldn't hold anything with my hands. I had no dexterity within them whatsoever. I couldn't even lift or push myself up with my right-hand side. That's how weak it had become. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't walk. If I had to sit down on the floor, I couldn't even kind of climb up on something to help me get myself up. If it wasn't for the fact I was pregnant, I would have ended up in a wheelchair, but I had to stay mobile for myself and obviously not wanting to let my muscles just deteriorate. As it turned out, I developed MS, multiple sclerosis, and my older cousin, Melanie, also had multiple sclerosis, diagnosed about the same time, age-wise. So I do think it's hereditary. And although I can't say I recovered fully, I recovered about 6 months after I'd had my daughter, left with some long-term problems, but I just wanted to get back into IT. Unfortunately, when I was ill, and although I didn't know it at the time, that was about May 2005, I didn't return back into full-time employment after then, purely because of the stress and the inconsistency with my health. For a few days I might be okay, but then another few days I might be really extremely fatigued and not able to get out of bed. There might be days where I could walk, not a substantial distance, but I could walk and I'd be okay. Yet there'd be other days where I'm literally pulling myself up off a chair and not able to stand at all, and my whole body would just be affected. It was definitely affecting my right-hand side more than anything else. And being right-handed, that affected even doing buttons, zips, but writing was the big one. Because of technology and with typing and keyboards and things, I relied very much on typing, but my touch typing skills went right out the window with my multiple sclerosis. You just wouldn't have thought I was even typing in English. You just hadn't got a clue what I was typing. Writing, I looked like I'd taken a degree, a doctorate, and become a doctor because nobody could read my writing. And even to this day, I've never been able to get that writing skill back again. It's just scribble and scrawl on a page. But my passion for IT was still there. Years later, when my husband and I divorced, I was actually living in France with my 2 young daughters, and I knew I wanted to do something in IT. It turned out to be Masquerading Limited. I put all my free time, my spare time, my times when I was just bored and wanted to do something, I invested it into planning this business. And it was a hobby, but it was a passion as well. I'd set up Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter when that came along, and even Musically, which everybody now knows as TikTok. I had that when I was in France because I had this desire to do something in IT. I was programming and writing HTML and doing anything and everything I could do. Yes, at this point I was learning things off Google, but my passion was there. Had it been a full-time job, I couldn't have done it. Yes, I was a single parent at this point because my husband and I had divorced, but there was just me and the girls. So I would push myself to get them into school, come home, maybe have some time off to sleep or do a few things around the house. Then I'd sit in front of the computer until lunchtime and I wouldn't move. Sometimes there were days or weeks I didn't actually achieve anything because I just didn't have the energy to do it. But then there were those times where maybe late at night I'd have a surge of energy. Is that a word? I just made that up. A surge, that's the word I was looking for, a surge of energy, and just get on and start doing things. And I was in chat forums and Googling things to find out how I could actually work on the things I wanted to do. And the website was practically a copy of Facebook. And I got it exactly how I wanted it. When I returned back to the UK in end of July 2018, I wanted to make Masquerading actually work. To this day, Masquerading still isn't quite there. Things are happening this year, but oh my God, it has been such a long drawn out process from 2015 to where are we now? We are 2024. So 9 years so far. And I'm hoping that this is the year that it's actually going to take off because my passion for it and my passion for being in IT is still there. And okay, I've just had the equivalent of like 3 months off because health-wise, I couldn't do anything. I practically had become a couch potato. And I know a lot of people do over Christmas time, but this was worse than that. I hardly got dressed and my physical body wasn't been right. And I couldn't even type properly. And I didn't even have the desire to open up the computer some days. I just felt so bad. And yet my passion for it still shines through. And when I'm talking to people about Masquerading, people can see the excitement. And it's not just about the idea of the Masquerading website. It's about everything that I do. It could be doing things on MailChimp, or it could be getting the domains, doing stuff on the servers, anything. It's just anything like that just really fires my passion for IT. So if you haven't heard of Masquerading, I suggest you check it out. It's basically the social fiction community, and it's where you can be who you want to be. Think of Facebook and think of being in character, in costume, and having all the events that you could ever want to go to on that website. And that's what it is. It is a niche social fiction community, and it is open to anybody as long as you take on a persona or you dress up in costume. And to this day, I still have a passion for working on that website. It is my baby, if you look at it from that point of view. It's what drives me every day to get up and get out of bed. And as things slowly happen throughout 2024, hopefully the world will see how big masquerading could actually be, and hopefully it will be as big as I want it to be. So that's my background into tech. If you like this episode, can I ask you to like it, share it, subscribe it? Come back for the next episode. But the Tech Talks part of it is only part of this journey. In the next episode, I'm going to be going through my soul journey and how the two overlap and collide together. So see you in the next episode of the Tech Talks and Soul Walks podcast.